My wife and best friend thought I was blind. They hid behind sweet smiles and business meetings thinking I'd never catch on to their little secrets. But one day, I found out everything. And if they thought that was the end, they clearly didn't know what real revenge looked like. But let's start with the fun part. My name's Ben, 32 years old. Life seemed pretty much under control. A solid job, a beautiful wife named Sarah, 28, and my best friend Mike, 30, who'd been my go-to guy since high school. We'd been through everything together, from late-night road trips to pulling each other out of trouble. And Sarah, she was my rock, my supposed partner in crime. If I ever found myself in a mess, I'd count on those two to have my back. Or at least I thought I could. Then the small stuff started adding up. Sarah began working late more often. And Mike? He suddenly got too busy to hang out, missing our usual meetups for some vague excuses. This guy, who used to call me up for the smallest things, now barely picked up the phone. Weird, right? At first, I convinced myself it was just life. People get busy, but deep down, something was buzzing, like an alarm that wouldn't shut off. Ever have that gut feeling like you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop? I brushed it off at first, thought I was just being paranoid. But the little things piled up. Sarah wouldn't text as much, and when I asked about her day, she'd give these short, rehearsed answers that didn't sound like her at all. And Mike? He was distant, always in a hurry to leave, like he had somewhere else. No, someone else to be. There was this one night when Sarah was working late. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding my phone, staring at her contact, and feeling like something was seriously off. I thought, dude, just let it go. But the nagging suspicion was like a heavy weight I couldn't shake off. I'd always been the laid-back type, the things work out guy. But this didn't sit right. So I made up my mind. I was going to do a little digging. Nothing too wild, just enough to clear my head. Little did I know that decision would be the start of uncovering a mess that'd change everything. One evening, Sarah was supposedly off on a business trip. She'd left in a rush, barely saying goodbye, so imagine my surprise when I spotted her phone charging on the kitchen counter, left behind, plain as day. Usually, I'm all about respecting personal space, but this time, the itch to check it was unbearable. Something deep inside was screaming, and I just knew I'd find something if I looked. So, yeah, I caved. With a shaky hand, I picked up the phone, opened her messenger app, and, well, there it was. A whole conversation with Mike. Not some casual, hey, how are you stuff, but a back and forth packed with hints, secrets, and we can't let Ben know vibes. Every line was like a punch in the gut. I felt my heart racing faster with each message. They weren't just talking. They were planning. Discussing their little secret meetings, how great they felt together, and then the worst part, talking about their future. A future where, yeah, apparently I didn't make the cut. I could barely process it. My mind went blank, then angry, then back to shock. Sitting there, reading those messages, it felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. My first instinct, storm in, throw their phones out the window, and confront them right then and there. But something in me held back. I realized right then I had to play this smart. The way I saw it, they were already 2 steps ahead, sneaking around like pros. I'd have to be smarter, 1 step further ahead, and patient enough to make it count. Not gonna lie, sleep wasn't even on the table that night. My mind was running a marathon, fueled purely by anger and the kind of betrayal that flips your world upside down. Every thought I had circled back to one thing: payback. I wanted them to feel the same gut punch of pain, the betrayal, the fire of knowing someone close has wrecked your trust. If they thought I'd never find out, they were in for a surprise. They'd underestimated me, but that was their first mistake. This was my life, my world, and I was about to show them I wasn't the kind of guy you double-cross. The next day, I went about everything like nothing happened. Smiling, chatting, business as usual. When Mike stopped by my office, casually mentioning he wanted to help with some paperwork, I had to dig deep to keep from calling him out right there. Every word he said was like a reminder of his betrayal, but I kept it cool, even threw in a friendly smile. "Hey man, why don't you come over for dinner tonight?" I suggested, letting a little smirk slip through. "Sarah will be glad to see you too." He blinked, probably surprised I was offering, but he didn't have a clue. To him, I was just his good old friend, the guy who'd trust him with his life. He accepted, clueless that this invitation was the first piece of my plan falling into place. If they wanted a game, I'd give them one they'd never forget. When Mike and Sarah showed up for dinner, their faces told the whole story. They were trying hard to play it cool, but the way they avoided each other's eyes was like a neon sign flashing guilty. They kept this awkward distance, like they were afraid I'd notice if they stood too close. Perfect. I played my role of the clueless, friendly husband to perfection, cracking jokes and keeping things light, all while watching them squirm. Dinner was a masterpiece of uncomfortable pauses and sideways glances. I made sure the conversation stayed just this side of awkward, enough to keep them on edge, without giving away that I was in on their little secret. Every time they relaxed, I'd ask a question about old times or some story from our high school days. Watching them shift in their seats, nervously laughing, "What que sería?" was almost worth the pain of the whole betrayal. After dinner, I poured them a little more wine, nudging the nostalgia button just enough to get them reminiscing. "Remember those late nights back in the day?" I said, raising my glass. "When it was just us, no secrets, no drama." Their faces fell just a little, the weight of what they'd done sinking in. They thought I was just being sentimental, and I could see them trying to smile it off, not realizing that every word was planned. I let them think they'd gotten away with it, kept the charm turned up, making them believe I was just happy to be in their company. But inside, I knew I was going to take everything they valued, piece by piece, the same way they'd taken my trust and torn it to shreds. That night was just the first step. I started pulling the strings, and let me tell you, it was a work of art. A few fake messages here, a little twist of the truth there, and suddenly Mike and Sarah's perfect romance started crumbling. I'd send Mike fake messages pretending to be Sarah, dropping hints that she might be seeing someone else. Nothing too obvious, just enough to make him second-guess her every move. For Sarah, I made it seem like Mike was rekindling things with his ex. I'd slip in a line here or there, suggesting he missed the old days. Classic stuff, but it worked like magic. It didn't take long before they were at each other's throats. Every time they argued, I'd be there, acting like the concerned friend, listening to their complaints and offering advice. Mike would show up at my door late at night, venting about how he didn't trust Sarah anymore. Meanwhile, Sarah would call me, teary-eyed, saying she didn't understand what had gotten into Mike. "Ben, I just don't get it. He's acting like I'm hiding something," Sarah would sob into the phone, and I'd give her my best supportive friend voice. "Hey, Sarah, maybe he's just stressed, you know? Relationships can be complicated." But inside, I was grinning ear to ear. Watching them unravel, knowing they thought I was their lifeline, was oddly satisfying. They'd trusted me, thinking I was there to pick up the pieces, while I was the one breaking them apart bit by bit. Each time they came to me, it only fueled my fire. I was nowhere near done. Once they were both worn down to the bone from all the drama I'd stirred up, I sent them both a friendly little invite. "Just a casual get-together," I said. "Let's clear the air, maybe patch things up, and bring back the good old days." They agreed, probably figuring everything would work itself out, like I was still blissfully clueless. They had no idea. When they walked into my place, I'd already set the scene for them. Right there in the living room, I'd pinned up screenshots of their messages, lined up photos from all those late nights they thought no one knew about. Every piece of proof I'd gathered was out in the open, in full view, like some twisted art gallery. The room was silent, save for the sound of their stunned breathing as they took it all in. Sarah went pale as a ghost, eyes darting around the room, trying to make sense of the ambush. "Mike?" He looked at me like he'd just seen a stranger, a version of me he didn't know existed. I watched the shock and fear in their eyes, and yeah, it was almost satisfying. All the lies, the secrets, they were laid bare. No escape, no more pretending. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. As they stood there, paralyzed by the evidence plastered across my living room, I took my time, letting the silence sink in. Then, I walked up to Mike, cool as ever, and dropped the truth bomb. I'd known about their relationship for weeks. The color drained from his face as he realized just how deep he'd dug himself. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and hit play on a few choice video clips I'd recorded. Little snippets of their private conversations, those secret meetups they thought were hidden. They just stood there, speechless, every lie they'd ever told me on full display, undeniable. There wasn't a single excuse left in them. Then, I gave them the kicker. With all the calmness in the world, I told them how I'd used my connections to spread a few rumors at their workplaces. You know, just a little whisper about how they'd messed up a big client deal. That tiny nudge triggered a full-blown investigation, which eventually led to them being put on leave. They were out of jobs, and they hadn't even seen it coming. Watching their faces as the reality hit, pure satisfaction. Their so-called perfect life was falling apart right in front of them, every piece of it crumbling because they thought they could fool me. Little did they know, I was just getting started. Sarah tried to apologize, her voice barely a whisper, but I just shook my head. Too little, way too late. Without a second thought, I filed for divorce, taking our house and a nice chunk of our joint savings with me, all thanks to a little legal move I'd been planning behind the scenes. While Sarah was busy with her secret life, I'd made sure everything would work in my favor when this moment came. Mike, left jobless and with his reputation trashed, thanks to that client incident I'd orchestrated. Sarah? She was left stranded, no family, no me, and no future she'd tried so hard to build at my expense. In the end, they lost it all. Each other, their careers, and any shred of trust we'd once shared. And me, walking away from it all, leaving them in the ruins of the mess they'd created, was the most satisfying part. I'd found closure, knowing I wasn't the one betrayed, but the one who won.